Welcome to the Straight from the Source's Mouth podcast. Frank talk about sex and dating.
Hello, everyone. Tamara here. Welcome to the show. Today's guest is Dr. Eran Magen, Assistant Clinical Professor at the Yale School of Medicine, Department of Psychology, and founder of parentingforhumans.com and divorcingdads.org. And we'll be talking about effective strategies for divorcing fathers. Thanks for joining me, Dr. Magen.
My great pleasure. Thanks for having me.
What got you into caring about divorcing dads? I assume that you were one at one point and learned something, or?
Yeah, it's kind of the intersection of my professional life and my personal life. I started a company a few years ago that works on suicide prevention with universities and now with the VA. And so suicide prevention is a big part of my awareness. And then I've been doing work with parents for longer than that. I love parenting. I think it's such an important connection between kids and parents. And then I went through this very painful, very difficult separation after my son was born. And after coming out of it, I mean, it took kind of a few years for me to get my legs back under me. And once I did, I realized this was very tough. And I went and did some research and found out that going through divorce or separation is a huge suicide risk for men, increases the suicide risk for men by a lot. And I thought that's really bad. And, you know, having gone through it and having gotten a lot of support and asked for a lot of support, I thought it would just be nice to offer more resources for dads going through this to be able to first stay alive and second, stay in their kids' lives, because I think that's also usually good for everybody.
Yeah, very important. It seems like men, they say, and from your research sounds like true, that men have a harder time after divorces and after relationships end than women do. Like, I think I've read somewhere a long time ago that, like, back in the day, we had to move on and like have kids and find other guys. So like we're like built to like get over it faster or something like that.
Oh, interesting. Like there's an evolutionary advantage. That's I don't know, plausible, I guess. I don't know who has a harder time. I know two things. From the research, I know that going through divorce doubles the risk of suicide for men, who are already at much higher risk of dying by suicide than women. But it doesn't have an effect on the suicide risk for women, which is great. I don't want anybody to die. But the men experience a big jump in the risk of death by suicide after a divorce. Women don't. So I know this from the research. In terms of the actual lived experiences of people, I don't know who has a harder time, but I know that there are far fewer resources for men than for women. Partly it's kind of this self-perpetuating, feedback loop, because men tend to look for resources and reach out for support a lot less than women. And so there's this like ecosystem of support for women at the end of a major relationship, and there's not really the same kind of thing for men. And so between those factors, I thought this would be a good place to step in and just offer some support based on my both professional training and my personal experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. And women tend to talk more, so we'll just like tell all our friends about it and vent and get what we need. And guys don't tend to talk as much, or
even on the way to the divorce, right? Women probably have good close friends that they're talking with, and their whole network is sort of revving up in preparation for this to happen. And then when it happens, everybody's activated and ready. And men quite often just don't tell anybody. They're either embarrassed or hope it'll blow over, kind of in denial or whatever, and they just don't share. And so when it actually happens, they're in free fall. There's just nothing around them. They need to start from scratch.
Yeah, I've also heard that they feel like it's more of a failure, or they feel like it's a failure, like a personal failure, right, when it happens for them, versus, I don't know if women necessarily see it that way, or maybe some do, but yeah, I can see that too. All right. So how do you help people? We've covered that it definitely is a bad thing. And how do you, what's some things you've come to find out?
Well, mostly I help by providing resources and support for men going through this. The resources are built around these 4 pillars of successfully going through a divorce when you're a dad. One is legal, mainly the custody part, because custody overwhelmingly goes to women in the U.S. I believe in the world, but don't quote me on that. But one is just if there's a disagreement about who sees the kids when, then that's one part that has to be addressed. So custody and visitation and all of that. And then number 2 is co-parenting effectively, right? Managing the relationship with the person who used to be your spouse or your romantic partner, and now this person's function mainly is the other parent of your kids, but this has to be coordinated. This has to be done well. Ideally lower the conflict, ideally shield the kids from whatever conflict exists, if one exists, and then just doing things in a way that works for the kids. So that's the second pillar. And then the third is just parenting, because you're still a dad, especially if your kids and you spend a good deal of time together. So you just need to figure out how to do this stuff, right? How to feed them and activitize them and play date them and hang out with them and support them and help them with homework and all this stuff. And then the fourth, just in general, just rebuilding a life that you love, just enjoying yourself even when you're not with your kids, and realizing that you can still do a lot to and deserve having a life that you enjoy. So these are the 4 kind of content areas that I build resources around: legal, co-parenting, parenting, and then life in general. And I do this by creating resources that people can consume, so videos or articles, or there's a podcast that I do as well called Divorcing Dads. We have a group for divorcing dads to meet. And so people can sign up and just join, because, again, the problem is they don't talk to anybody. And so this is an opportunity to talk to other dads going through the process, and either with me or other people who've kind of gone through it, sort of like a big sib kind of notion, right? So you have people who are farther down the road and can help you gain perspective and get a sense of what to do, just get some support. So videos, articles, podcast, the group that we have going, these are the main things that I put together just to offer support and some guidance.
Yeah. And then to address the fourth one, having a life, since this is dating and sex podcast, do you want to talk about like the kinds of resources or what you might suggest for getting back out there in the dating world, or even starting sex again? And then also dating while co-parenting, because you have to, that's an issue, like especially if depending on who wanted it and how that's going, and having dates and yeah. So wherever you want to start with.
I think the most common question is when to start dating again. And I think it's a lot like when to start eating. Ideally when you're hungry. Although if you're in very bad shape, it may be a good idea to eat some food and see how you're tolerating it if you haven't eaten in a long time. Because it's also not good to not eat for a long time. This is where the analogy also breaks down, because it's totally fine to not date for a long time if that's just not what you want or need. But if you're nervous but sort of want to know, like, you can experiment. But otherwise, you start dating when you want to start dating. And for some people, it's weeks, and for some people, it's months, and for some people, it's years. And it's totally fine. I mean, it's part of this recovery from grief, really, right? So there's like a grief process that you need to complete, and then there's a dating process that's sometimes people overlap it and sometimes don't. But in general, it's a good idea to start dating, I think, when you're mostly happy with your life and you're just missing another person to be happy with, as opposed to you're totally miserable and you're hoping to find somebody who will lift you out of it. I'm sure I'm the first person who's ever said that, and so I'll need to trademark some part of it. But I think it's a good idea to put your life in order. So even though I know this is what we're going to be talking about here, and it's fine, but I think it's also very important to think about the building blocks that come before starting to date. How do we build a life that we enjoy? How do we just put together a weekly schedule, a monthly schedule, and just create this life experience that we like, that we enjoy waking up in the morning, and we enjoy doing the things we do, and we have good community, and we feel good in our body, and we feel good in our mind, and then we go out to meet more people.
Yeah, I was going to say, and when you mentioned earlier about, when you're ready and not like so miserable, you want someone to lift you out of it, because that is when you can fall prey to online dating scams. And when you're so desperate to find someone, and those are the type of people that prey or get preyed on as well. Like, they're just like, everything nice. They're like, yes, yes, yes. And they immediately start falling for that person. And that's a whole nother episode I already had, but I just wanted to also like put that out there to like make sure you're in a good spot so you don't fall for that kind of thing too.
Yeah, I think
Hi, everyone. Sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to point out that there is a send us a text message at the very beginning of the description, and you can use that to send an anonymous question or comment. So I'd really appreciate it. All right. Thanks.
So many problems with starting to date when not mostly happy with my own life. One of them is that I'll be completely desperate, which then makes me more likely to fall for scams like you were saying, but also I think makes me more likely to just repeat patterns and find myself in more or less the same relationship that I was in before, having not spent time to learn and figure out what happened and just do it intentionally. And again, coming to it from a place of strength. So I don't need the relationship. So I don't feel like if I meet somebody who like kind of has something that I'm sort of interested in, immediately I need to attach and latch on because that's the person my happiness depends on. That's just not the case, right? If I'm already feeling pretty good about my life, then I can release more easily when I understand that something's not going to work out.
Yeah. Like instead of ignoring red flags because you want someone, you're like, all right, like maybe that red flag or even yellow flag is like, it's not something you want to deal with. So yeah, you're more discerning when you are happy yourself. Yeah, definitely makes sense. All right. And then co-parenting and dating, or do you want to cover more, or we can come back to it too, but like have you seen issues, I'm assuming, with that kind of stuff, or jealousy? And
that's a huge topic, co-parenting and dating. There are a few types of dynamics that can exist between co-parents. I think one way to do kind of a 2x2 is to say parent one over it or not over it, and parent two over it or not over it. And ideally, both parents are over it and can just treat each other like people that maybe they don't want to spend a huge amount of time together, or maybe they want to spend as little time as possible, but they're just people and you can sort of tolerate it. And if somebody's still very reactive to the other person, then I would put them in the not over it category. And it may be for completely justified reasons, right? Maybe something horrible happened, but it's the not over it category at that point. Dating obviously is harder on the person who's not over it, either because they want the other person to come back to them or because they just don't want the other person to be happy ever, or for these kinds of reactive reasons. Another ingredient that's worth considering in there is the kids and how the kids participate in the co-parenting dynamic. Ideally, the kids don't, right? That's sort of rule number one of co-parenting. Insulate the kids completely from any kind of tension between the parents. The kids have a long list of things that are not their job, right? They're not the messengers. They're not the spies. They're not the judges. They're not the cops. There's all these things that kids should not be doing. And that it's very natural for co-parents to turn to kids and try to get them to do, right? Oh, tell mom that this, tell dad that it's not blah, blah, blah. What did you see when you went? Could you check to see if mom has whatever? At the same time, of course, information is going to flow, right? Kids talk, and it's a big part of their lives. Like, let's take this, basic shared custody situation. A kid is going to spend a lot of time with both parents, and what happens with the other parent is part of that kid's life. It's okay. It's okay to talk, just like they talk about stuff that happens at school. We don't go, la, 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 I don't want to know anything about this. Like, of course, we want to know as parents, but we want to maintain a delicate balance and not really kind of dig in and try to get more information and use them as spies. So more often than not, we're going to hear about a romantic partner from our child once that person has been introduced to the child. And so it's a big decision and something that requires some intentionality about whether or not and when to introduce someone we're dating to our kids, because part of the fallout will be that the co-parent will hear about it. And if the co-parent is over it, whatever that means in that big 2x2 matrix, if the co-parent is over it, then it probably doesn't matter very much, as long as we're with kind of a decent, non-terrifying person. And if the other parent is not over it, then we're probably going to hear about it, and it's probably going to intensify things. So I think those are all considerations, but the most important consideration is, what is it going to do to our kid or kids to meet this new person that we're dating? Is it going to confuse them, destabilize them? Is it going to be bad or good or neutral for them? And there's so many considerations there. Like, for example, with really young kids, I think it doesn't really matter. They don't care. They're so self-centered. You know, if somebody comes to hang out, like one of your friends, parents frequently have their friends over, or they'll go visit friends with or without other kids. It's fine. Kids don't care. They hardly remember these people unless you meet them multiple times. They never ask what happened to this one person that we saw that one time, because it's part of your life. It's not part of their life. They don't care. And then somewhere around 7, 8, 9, 10, depending on how socially aware and cued in they are, and probably depending on whether they're boys or girls, so kind of add 3 years of any kind of maturation if it's a boy required in order to have the same level of social awareness, probably. But at some point it starts mattering. And especially if you're starting to interact in ways that are more coupley, more overtly romantic or physical or sexual than with other friends, then it really starts mattering. And then it's worth thinking carefully about what you're showing your kids, what kind of expectations you're setting up, what kind of models you're demonstrating to them, and teaching them about how dating works and how relationships work. Because we learn almost everything from when we grew up in terms of how romantic partners do or don't interact with one another, right? And so this is very intense education that we're doing for the kids. Okay, I was talking now for a very long time, so I'm going to pause a little bit for breath and also see what you want to talk about.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I was, all that was good. And I was interested in hearing it. So yeah, I didn't want to interrupt with, the only thing I was going to add was just a random thing that I dated a guy who had kids, and it seemed like it was too soon to introduce us. But now that you say that, maybe it was just, I came across as just a random friend, hopefully.
How old were the kids?
Probably the 10, 11-ish. So
yeah, kind of on the edge, right? But there's the question is, do you feel like when you met them, and I don't know how many times you met them, but do you feel like after you met them, they were left wondering, where's Tamara now? What happened? Why aren't we seeing Tamara again? Or was it more of like, somebody passed through our life like different people that we see sometimes? Dad's coworker came one day and we hung out, and then Dad's coworker never came again. He
brought them over to my place once, and then we went to like an amusement park with them. So it probably was more something, but then we only saw each other a few more times. Like, so yeah, I'm not sure. Like, that's probably something he should be concerned about or wondering, or like,
definitely his job as a parent, right? Not yours as the parent as a person dating the parent. But I think if you present it low key enough to the kids, I think it can be okay. I do think it requires some thinking, but also I think it's a very important consideration when you're dating someone as a parent. What's the dynamic between them and your kid or kids? Yeah. It's so important. And I can imagine somebody saying, I know I like this person now, but I need to see this person with my kids because they're going to spend a lot of time together. So let's see how that goes. Or somebody might say, no, I want to really build a very solid connection with this person and then introduce a kid. It's all legitimate. There's no obvious right answer. But when there's no obvious right answer, the other side of the coin is that there's also no obvious wrong answer. I mean, there are some things that are obviously a bad idea to do, but most people won't do them because they're reasonable. So you can choose one path or the other. We're all flexible. We learn. We figure it out. Talk to people again, talk to friends beforehand. Think about it a little bit. The fact that it's even in our awareness is so important. Just say, okay, I just started dating this woman and I like her and we met a couple of times and I'm wondering whether or not I should introduce her to the kids. Also, it'll be easier to meet because, they're just at my place often and otherwise I'm not available. And just ask 3 friends and just start thinking about it. But just maybe put some thought and intentionality in it and then decide what you think is right. It's, your kids best.
Yeah. And do you ever ask the kids, depending on age, obviously, but is that one of the jobs they shouldn't have, or should they be brought into the discussion as far as if they're ready to see it or not? Or I guess maybe they won't ever be ready, depending.
If they're ready to meet someone that you're dating,
or even find out that you're dating, if you're new, you think you're going to start dating, even asking that question, would you want to meet my new person, or is that all adult decided and kids don't have a say in that part of it?
I'm a big fan of bringing kids into conversations, even fairly young kids, as long as it's stuff that they can understand and stuff that they might remotely care about. So I think with a 2-year-old, I don't think it's worth having a conversation about, daddy's considering dating again. And maybe it's like, I don't know that they care. And I think that's probably true up until somewhere around like age 6 or something, when they probably 5, maybe 6, like they probably have a sense of what this means. And they know some friends whose parents are together and some friends whose parents are not together. And to them, depending on when the separation or divorce happened, it might seem completely normal to have divorced parents. But at that point, if you're thinking that it's going to intrude on their lives, that they're going to feel it at some point, I think it's important to have some kind of conversation. If it's never going to really interact with their lives, I don't think it's critical. Just like, again, you don't talk with them about many things that don't touch their lives, right? They don't want to hear about your running club. They just don't care. If they're bigger, I think, again, it's reasonable to talk about with them. And just, each kid is different. We have to pay attention to how they're responding. Do we think this is creating anxiety for them? Do we think this makes them happier or excited? And just follow the child. I think that's, in general, my favorite thing to do, right? Involve them and involve them in an age-appropriate way, and then follow their reaction. If they're leaning in, we can do more of this together. And if they really just don't care, then I think it's up for you to choose. But I don't think it's a strictly adult only, we don't talk about it. Certainly if the kids are older, right? 10, 11, 12, 14, 16, like this is on their mind. They're dating. They're trying to figure it out. Also, they might be like, oh, this is weird. Dad's not dating. Or like, what's happening? Or it's good to talk about these things because, again, they have so much they can learn from you about this process.
Yeah. It reminds me of a show on Netflix, Alpha Males, where, well, this is like the extreme. One of the daughters of the men, like they're older men, but and she's older as well, but she actually goes on Tinder for him and like creating a profile and like sets up dates and says he should sleep with at least 10 people before to get over his ex. And she helps him say all the right stuff to get the girls or whatever. So a little extreme there, but
yeah, that's a good ally to have in your back pocket.
Yeah. And younger kids, the ones that are dating, they might know even more, or especially if it's been, 20 years since you've ever dated and don't know the scene.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to that point that we were talking about before of when to start dating, right? If you're coming to it from a strong place, then from a place of strength in your life, and being happy in your own life, it's very likely you're going to be projecting a sense of like ease and comfort. Maybe you're experimenting with things and figuring out, and learning about it as you go, but it's okay. You're not desperate. You're not upset. You're not. And I think you're teaching a lot by showing this kind of energy to your kids as you're talking about it to the extent they want to hear. Again, most kids don't even want to imagine their parents kissing anyone. And so this may be just kind of a passing thing. It does merit a more serious conversation if you are feeling like you are considering a long-term committed relationship with somebody who will also be in the lives of your kids, and you want them to meet, like, again, there are multiple ways to do it. You could do just a casual meet and just see what the dynamic is like. That's probably a very fair way to start. But at some point, there's going to be a conversation that says, do you remember the lady that we met and her kid, right? Blended families also have, right? Do you remember the lady we met and her kid? And we all went to what? Yeah, it was great. And we went to the water park, and then, and then we all went to the movies. Great. Yeah. So, I intend to keep seeing her. Like, I really like her, right? And I want to ask, how were you feeling with her? And probably the kid is going to say something like, it's fine, seems fun. Is she going to move in? A more aware child might ask, and then you give the answer, right? This is probably a good thing to talk about with the kids and not just declare. But again, as long as that person is not moving in the next day, the kids are probably going to be like, yeah, fine. Why would they care?
Yeah. Are there different considerations when it comes to starting to have sex with other people for the first time, or similar to dating, where if you're healthy and fine and good, or do you have any thoughts on definitely waiting or definitely don't? Or
I think the biggest consideration is around accidental pregnancies and finding yourself with more kids, which I know is kind of, I'm guessing is kind of sideways from what you may have been asking about, but I think is critical. I had such a fear when I started dating of like finding myself with another child, because I'm so totally committed to my child. And if I accidentally found myself with another child, with a woman who were not in a committed relationship, and then she decided to move somewhere, and what would I do? I would tear in half. Terrified me. Terrified. And so I think that's a big thing to think about. I mean, it's never a good idea to have a child accidentally with somebody you don't have a strong relationship in my opinion. But I think it's even worse when you have, the consequences are even worse when you have already a kid or kids that you're committed to and you're trying to be as responsible as you can about them, and suddenly finding yourself with another person that you are committed to the child, right? Another person, and this level of responsibility. So I think that's a hugely important consideration. You cannot afford accidents there. You have to be a grown-up about it.
Yeah, no, actually, and I'm glad you did mention that. I actually know someone who assumed she was too old to get pregnant and got pregnant at 44.
Yeah, no, people
with someone who had kids.
Yeah.
He didn't necessarily want the kid, but she kept it, and yeah.
Yeah, and then off to the races, right? It's so I think that's a hugely important consideration. Otherwise, I don't know that it's different, after a divorce or with kids or without kids, than it was before. Sex does different things for different people, right? For some people, it's this huge and instant source of attachment, and for other people, not. I think it is a very good idea to talk about it, but I would say the same for people who are not divorced or are not men or are not parents. I think it's just a good idea for everybody to understand, what does this mean for you? What does this mean for me? How are we staying safe in terms of pregnancy, in terms of potential sexually transmitted infection? What's okay? What's not okay? Things like that. I think that's such an important conversation. What do you like? What do you not like? Like sort of the usual things that are a good idea to talk about. I don't think that changes before, but I think it's a good idea to be aware what this does for us.
Yeah, I was going to say, I could imagine having like men who've been married a long time and newly out there. Perception is that women are more aggressive, are going to be more open to it, try harder than back when they were younger, and that wasn't true potentially. Or I don't know. I guess that's not necessarily a bad thing depending on who you are, but like just the whole different world of it.
Yeah, and I think for some people, got married really young and did not have, or doesn't matter if they were young, I guess some people got married early on in their sort of sexual trajectory and didn't get to know a lot of people at that level of intimacy. And some people are shocked at how different people are in terms of what they like and what they don't like and how they react. And again, what the meaning that comes with sex, the meaning attached to it. So it can be very confusing. Certainly if you were in a long-term relationship and suddenly being with a person who's just nothing like the person you remember, who you maybe assume is just the ambassador for all people of that sex in sex. They're not. Everybody's super different. And that's part of the discovery. So I guess, and then it's even more so if prior to being in that marriage or long-term committed relationship, you were not with many people before. So all the more so you think like, okay, this is just how it works. And then they discover like not everybody likes doing it upside down, hanging from the ceiling, or you're like, everybody does, and maybe not everybody's like, who knows, right? It's just everybody's different.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I don't know. Yeah, I will leave that the comment I was going to make to myself. But yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, like you said, if they're like, well, this always worked, so I'm doing this, and they're like, and they're the other, and a lot of times, another issue is people are afraid to like hurt people's feelings, so they won't say anything or just kind of. And then that's a whole another dynamic too. Like this thing always works, so I'm doing this, but the woman's too afraid to say like, oh no, really, actually do this.
Yeah.
And that happens a lot too. So it's just, all kinds of stuff. But anyway, back to the gist of your thing you do and divorcing dads and giving resources. How can people reach you? I know we mentioned your websites, but are there any like personal way to reach you, or you prefer to go through the website? Or
the website has all the information. It'll have my email and it'll have the videos and the podcast and the support group and all of it. So it's divorcingdads.org, and it's just all there.
And any closing comments or things you wish we would have covered and didn't?
Thank you. That's so nice. 3 things, with your permission. 3 things. 1, even if you don't have a lot of people you're comfortable reaching out to, reach out to people, reach out to somebody and talk to somebody, right? Reach out to your friends or your therapist if you have one, or your coach or your family or your faith leader or whoever you find. And if you're in a bad spot and you don't know who to talk to, call 988. It's a free service. You're paying for it with your tax money. It's confidential. It's 24/7 counseling available countrywide. 988, like 911, but 988. Always a good idea to talk. Always better to talk than to not talk. So that's 1. Number 2 is just remembering how important it is for kids to have their parents. I think at the start of a divorce or a separation, many men feel like garbage and feel like maybe their kids are better off not having them in their lives. There's a lot of negative messaging that men can get in the process of divorce or separation. Personally, kind of systemically, it happens. And it's so important to hold on to the realization, to the understanding and belief that kids are better off when they have good contact with both their parents. And you are one of those 2 parents. And kids will be worse off if one of the parents checks out geographically, or by dying, or by becoming sort of emotionally disconnected. It's just worse for the kids. Your kids need you. They do better when you're there. They do worse when you're not there. So just hold on to that. That's number 2. And number 3 is you totally get to have a life that you enjoy, regardless of what's happening in the divorce and regardless of what's happening with the custody, right? Maybe you miss your kids horribly and you only see them a little bit and you're in court and you're trying to get more time, or you were in court and you're not going to see your kids a lot. Maybe you see them every other weekend, which happens quite frequently, and you desperately want to see them more, and you're worried. First of all, they're not going to forget about you. I mean, kids are hardwired to love their parents. It takes so much for kids to disconnect from parents. So worry less about that. When you're with them, be awesome. But when you're not with them, enjoy yourself, right? Don't be a jack-in-the-box dad who's kind of hiding in his little box and only springs out happily when the kids are around and it's fun. And then the kids go and then goes, I say this as somebody who was a jack-in-the-box dad for probably about 2 years, maybe a little longer. But you can have fun. Like, it's totally fine. It doesn't mean you love your kids less. If you enjoy yourself when they're not there, schedule activities you enjoy, take the class you've been wanting to take all this time and couldn't do that trip that you've been thinking about for the past 6 years. But just build a life that you enjoy. Get enough sleep, do the basic things. But it's totally okay for you to enjoy yourself, even when things are not going well vis-a-vis the divorce and even custody. Just have as much fun as you can. This is your life. Do that and then be a great dad too. These are the 3 things. So thank you.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And the one about still having a life, like I knew someone that basically he was martyring himself. He felt so bad that it went bad. So he was like just going above and beyond and not having as much of a life, or like not willing to date as much because, he felt so bad about it. And I pointed that out, and it seems like to make a difference. So, but yes, thank you very much for being on. That was great stuff. Very informational and educational and interesting.
Hooray.
And yes, thanks again. And if you like this episode, be sure to tell your friends about it and rate it as well. And thank you once again, Dr. Magen.
My great pleasure. I'll definitely be telling my friends about it.
Thank you. Alrighty. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Frank Talk, sex and dating educates.